Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Discussions. On today's episode, just like yesterday's episode, I'm going to hop right into the action. I'm going to start with Impact Wrestling, last night's Impact Wrestling. Now, in yesterday's episode, I gave some of my thoughts and opinions on where things might go and, some current things going on in Impact Wrestling. And last night, well, let's get right into it. So last night, our first match, we're going to be discussing Moose and Brian Myers teaming up to take on Yuya Uemura and oh god, I don't know how to pronounce this. Bhupinder Gujar. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know who Bhupinder Gujar is. However, I have heard of Yuya Uemura, and this dude seems to be a promising wrestler for Impact Wrestling, right? He reminds me a little bit of Speedball Mike Bailey in the sense that he's been getting some good TV time, getting some good matches, and really gaining some traction. And that's one of the most important things you can do. And I think that's what's most impressive about places like Impact Wrestling. They're really good at giving their wrestlers TV time, whereas companies like AEW and WWE, they have so many people on their roster that they struggle to fill everyone in. Whereas Impact Wrestling, I feel like if they're ready for you in any way, shape, or form, they are ready to give you a good amount of TV time in some way. And I think Uemura, he's young, he's up and coming. He certainly has potential, and he could certainly make a name for himself later down the line. And so, just the fact that he got to wrestle two really big wrestlers such as Moose and Brian Myers is very impressive. And the fact that he's been getting opportunity after opportunity to show himself off and kind of prove himself in that ring, motherfucker. I apologize for that, ladies and gentlemen. Forgot to silence my phone. Made sure to do it after that, but and excuse the language. That was a bit of a slip. I do apologize for that. But quickly, we're gonna move on from that terrible interruption. And as I was saying, I think it's very impressive that Yuya Uemura has been able to, prove himself in that ring and build himself up moment after moment, match after match. He's been gaining some really good traction and good matches, and I'm very, very happy and pleased with what he's been doing. And regardless of win or lose, he's gaining attention from fans. He's gaining TV time, and that's one of the most important things you can do in this business. Now, Moose and Brian Myers did win. No major shock there. I will admit, though, I feel like as of lately for Moose, they haven't really had anything big. And this is going back all the way to since he lost to Josh Alexander for the Impact World Championship, all the way back then. I believe it was at Rebellion. He just hasn't been able to kind of get back from that point. And it's not to necessarily say that, oh, he's in a terrible position. It's to say that look at where his character was this time, like a year or two ago, and now look where he is. He's losing to guys like Joe Hendry for the Digital Media Championship. He's fighting. He's a mid carder at this point, and that is not really a Moose position in my opinion. And I will say this idea of Moose and Brian Myers is interesting to me because obviously I don't know if Matt Cardona is still on Impact Wrestling or not, but it's interesting to see Brian Myers team up with that of Moose, especially considering, Brian Myers, good friends with Matt Cardona. They have their own kind of tag team together in that sense. Again, though, I don't know. Maybe Matt Cardona is not on Impact anymore. I mean, Chelsea Green isn't, so I don't know if that means that Matt left as well or not. But again, Moose and Brian Myers did get the victory, which is good for them. I don't necessarily know what exactly the plans are for them in the future, but I'm hoping they get some sort of traction and some sort of upcoming storylines that are beneficial to them. Now, we also saw Sami Callihan accepting the challenge of Diener to meet him in the ring, and well, it turns out that Diener wasn't prepared, or Actually, no. Apologies. I'm reading this off of my phone. I haven't caught up with Impact. Same with AW. So I apologize for stuttering and I apologize for pauses and things like that. But as I was saying, Diener had ended up revealing that it wasn't for Callahan to face him in a match. It was for him to face Khan, and well, it turns out we got Sami Callahan versus Khan with Diener and Angels in his corner, as they like to call themselves, the Design. I'm going to be straightforward right now. I think the Design is a very good idea. When Violence by Design first started, I was intrigued by that team as well. And then when they started kind of moving that and pushing it more so towards that of more so towards that of Diener and more so towards that of the newer generation in a way, and Eric Young left, we now have Diener. And Diener's been able to take the Design to a whole new level, in my opinion, because Diener has really been given some amazing character development with that. And he's been able to take guys like Khan and Alan Angels, who originally didn't really have anything big going for them in Impact. And now they're part of what could very well be one of the biggest current factions in Impact, if not the only current faction in Impact, because to be honest, I don't see many others. But I think the Design is up there. And so we win or lose, again, same as the last match, win or lose, this is beneficial to the Design because this is a good storyline, especially to be put in something with that of Sami Callahan. Now, their plan did backfire as Sami ended up winning via disqualification, but nonetheless, Sami did get the win, and him and Diener, they're probably going to be going at this for a while until the next pay-per-view. But nonetheless, I'm a major Sami Callahan fan, and I'm starting to become a Diener fan as well through this rivalry. And so I'm intrigued and I'm impressed and I'm excited to see a one-on-one match between Sami Callahan and Diener. And in my personal opinion, it has to be on pay-per-view. It has to be, because you need that type of pay-per-view extremity. And you need the longevity. You need the lengthy kind of match that only a pay-per-view can provide. Now, we also saw Alicia Edwards take on Jody Threat. Now, from what I understand, Alicia is heel. She has turned to whatever Eddie Edwards has turned to. And so, from my understanding, Alicia Edwards is a heel. Nonetheless, though, that being said, Jody Threat did get the victory. I don't really know Jody Threat very well. I know Alicia Edwards a little better. I never really knew Alicia as a wrestler, though. So, in terms of wrestling, I don't even know who deserves the win and who doesn't. What I can say is this is intriguing if Alicia Edwards is heel, and it's intriguing that this Jody Threat got the win, because maybe she could move on and get some other matches in the future. Now, we also saw the Impact World Champion Steve Maclin team up with his new companions, Champagne Singh and Shira, taking on PCO, Heath, and Rhino. Now, Heath and Rhino, I will admit, is the one thing I feel like Impact has screwed up a lot of times in the past. Originally, when Heath and Rhino kind of reformed their tag team and they became friends again and they fought Violence by Design and they won the Impact World Tag Team titles, I thought that was very impressive. I thought that was a really great place to go to with this storyline. And then when they kind of just randomly had the Motor City Machine Guns come in and get the win and take the titles off of them on just a regular TV appearance, not even a pay-per-view, it was a little upsetting. It was a little unfortunate. So I will admit there have been times where I feel like Impact has kind of screwed up and dropped the ball with guys like Heath and Rhino, but nonetheless, I'm glad to see them gain TV time. I'm glad to see them in matches, and I'm glad to see them in a match with PCO, because this means that not only are they babyface, but this means that they are in support of PCO, and they are in support of what is going on with Steve Maclin in the Impact World Championship, and that could benefit both Heath and Rhino later on down the line to get into world title gold, whether it be singles or tag team. Either way, it could kind of benefit them in the long run if they can get the win. And they did get the win, which is nice. PCO Heath and Rhino getting the win, and I think this is beneficial to them as much as it is PCO, because this is sending a message to Steve Maclin that he beat him last night, and now he's gonna, beat him at the pay-per-view and take the title. And I think that's a big message that PCO is trying to send. And those are big shoes to fill with that belt, in the sense that Josh Alexander is the longest reigning champion. He lost due to vacancy. So later on down the line, Steve Maclin or PCO, one of those two, they're going to have to be thinking to themselves, whoever walks out with that belt, whether it's Steve or whether it's PCO, they're going to have to be thinking in the back of their mind, one day, Josh Alexander's going to return, and he's going to want that title back, and I'm going to have to be ready for that. That's what's going to have to be sitting in the back of their mind, Now, we also saw Jonathan Gresham take on Mike Bailey. Now, this, from what I understand, this is a long series of matches right now that's been going on between these two, and Jonathan Gresham did get the win, which is impressive to me, because I feel like Jonathan Gresham, another ball that Impact has been dropping since his signing. I feel like every pay-per-view match he's had, he's been losing. But nonetheless, he's had some impressive matches. He's had some great times to prove himself and show himself in that ring, which is really beneficial for him. Nonetheless, though, Speedball Mike Bailey, you can tell there's something big for him, especially after his match with Josh Alexander only a few months ago. You can just feel it in the air that Speedball Mike Bailey has somewhere he wants to go, and he has plans to take it all the way and to, eventually become Impact World Champion. And to be honest with you, I would not be surprised if one day in the near future we see Speedball Mike Bailey as Impact World Champion. Now, we also saw Sami Callihan go up to Rich Swann, asking for his help in the design. This is interesting to me because Sami Callihan, first of all, not one to ask for help very often, and two, Sami Callihan and Rich Swann, these two have went to war with one another. They've been friends with one another. It's a mutual kind of respect, I feel as though they have. And as I've mentioned before, I am a major Rich Swann fan, and so I can only imagine if we do get a rivalry between Rich Swann and the design. But I could also personally see Rich Swann saying, "Hey, I could also see Rich Swann turning heel, because he's been a guy that he lost against Josh Alexander for the Impact World Championship. He lost against Steve Maclin in the Falls Count Anywhere. He's just not, he hasn't been, ever since he re-signed, he's been falling further and further, deeper and deeper into this downward spiral. And whenever we see that happen with a wrestler, it usually, especially a wrestler like Rich Swann, who was on top of the mountain and kind of just fell off, and he's still a babyface, it usually means that there's a heel turn coming up. And so that's an accurate assumption in my opinion. We also saw Scott D'Amore make it official next week. Steve Maclin will defend his Impact World Championship against Rhino, which is interesting to me, because Rhino and Steve Maclin, Rhino does remind me of someone who would be a good prospect to be Impact World Champion. Now, obviously, I really highly doubt we would see him win, but nonetheless, I think it would make for a great match, and I think it would make for another impressive build-up to this idea of PCO taking on Steve Maclin later on down the road, because PCO is going to be watching that match carefully, and he's going to be looking at that and thinking, well, whoever wins, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be ready to take them on. And so that's something that's going to be intriguing. That's something that is going to be building into this storyline, and whoever wins this match, that's probably going to be, we're probably going to get some sort of confrontation between Rhino and PCO, or Steve Maclin or PCO. Whoever wins the title is going to have some sort of interaction with PCO after the match. Now, we also got the Impact Wrestling debut of Trinity Fatu. Now, for those of you that don't know, or maybe you don't remember the reports, I want to say it was back last year around May, I think it was around this time last year, we saw Sasha Banks and Naomi. It was reported that Sasha Banks and Naomi of WWE took their women's world championships, put them in the office of head of talent relations. I forget his name. John Laurinaitis, and they had walked out of WWE. Now we've seen Sasha Banks become Mercedes Moné, and she has went on to New Japan to be a IWGP World Women's Champion. She recently lost that belt. We also saw, and now we are currently seeing Trinity Fatu, formerly known as Naomi, making her Impact debut. We have not seen Trinity Fatu wrestle in over a year. She has not had a match in over a year. She's barely made any appearances in any way for over a year. This is really like her first time back, and as far as I know, it's her first time in Impact Wrestling, which is huge for her. We also saw Deonna Purrazzo call out Trinity, and then we saw Jordynne Grace, who also kind of called out Trinity in some way, because we are going to see Jordynne Grace versus Purrazzo for the Knockouts World Championship, and it seems to me as though whoever wins at Under Siege is going to be fighting Trinity next, which I think is very interesting. What's more interesting to me is the fact that both Trinity Fatu and Mercedes Moné, since making their new debuts to these different companies, Mercedes Moné in New Japan and Trinity Fatu in Impact Wrestling, both of them have pretty much gotten women's title matches right off the bat, world title matches almost immediately. So that's really something big and really something to look at. And I also like the fact that they're doing this big match between Deonna Purrazzo and Jordynne Grace. Big rematch. Both women, I feel like, are top of their division right now in the Knockouts division. And then the winner's going to go on to fight a potential future legend in the wrestling world in Trinity Fatu, who, former, over on WWE, former SmackDown Women's Champion, 2-time SmackDown Women's Champion. She's known for some of her amazing saves in the Royal Rumble matches. It's really impressive to see what she's done in her career, and she has a lot more to do as well. She's young, she's still moving forward. I can only imagine what she plans on doing in Impact Wrestling, because Impact Wrestling, in my opinion, has a lot more opportunity for the women's division, or as they like to call it, the Knockouts division, compared to that of WWE. Now, moving on for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, we kind of covered everything in the Impact Wrestling world. Going to move on. Going to talk about Friday Night Smackdown. But before I do, I just want to make a mention of this. Sometimes I talk about Friday Night Rampage for AEW. Sometimes I don't. Tonight, I'm not going to be touching on Friday Night Rampage. If you guys want anything in regards to Rampage, feel free to comment that down below. I can always talk about it in tomorrow's episode or even Sunday's episode. So just try and keep me posted so I know what you want to see. But nonetheless, moving on to Friday Night Smackdown, I don't really have any official matches or anything of that nature, but what I do have is, from what I understand, Cody Rhodes plans on being on SmackDown, before the draft is final, and before he has to go to Raw officially, and so I believe that is tonight. If he's on SmackDown, my question is he going to have some sort of confrontation with the Bloodline? And I'm also curious, the Usos and Solo and Roman and Paul are officially on SmackDown. Sami and Kevin, they are on Raw officially, and same with Riddle. However, they still have this match coming up for Backlash, and so one can only assume that they're going to have some sort of all-out war and some sort of confrontation going on down the line. And so I can only assume that that's going to be soon, and that's going to be related to whatever this is, to whatever this this rivalry is that's kind of going on between them. Because that's what, like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I can only assume that at Backlash, that 6-man match is going to end this rivalry, and the Bloodline's finally going to move on to something else, and Sammy and Kevin, they're going to move on to something else, and Riddle's going to move on to something else. And so and for Riddle, to be quite honest with you, I could personally see Riddle going forth towards the World's Championship, the new World Heavyweight Championship. I could personally see that happening as well. And so that's something to look at. Now, we've also been seeing the idea of the Street Profits on SmackDown. I'm sure they'll be making an appearance because the Street Profits, very impressive tag team. On top of that, because the titles have officially went to Monday Night Raw, the Undisputed Tag Team titles, I'm curious to see if maybe we will get some sort of announcement tonight from Triple H or something in regards to the new tag team titles, as well as an official title swap between Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley, because they are now switching brands, and as champions, they will most likely have to do a title swap. Bianca Belair flipping her Raw Women's title over to Rhea, as Rhea gives her SmackDown Women's title over to Bianca. It just makes more sense to me. On top of that, you have Charlotte Flair, who has stayed with WWE. With SmackDown. And honestly, I'm going to be honest, I saw that coming, because I can only assume that this is foreshadowing the idea of a match between Bianca Belair and Charlotte Flair, because Bianca Belair's hinted at it before. She's taken on and defeated every member of the Four Horsewomen. She's defeated Sasha Banks, she's defeated Becky Lynch, she's defeated Bayley, and now she wants to take on Charlotte Flair. And she's been calling out Charlotte Flair. And so we could very, very well see Charlotte Flair be Bianca Belair's next opponent, or we could see Io Sky take the Raw Women's title off of Bianca Belair, and from there see Bianca Belair and Charlotte Flair go on in one-on-one action to determine who's going to be next to challenge for the SmackDown Women's title. But regardless of that, I can assume we're going to see Bianca Belair and Damage Control on SmackDown in some way, shape, or form, considering they've both been drafted. I'm assuming we're going to see Austin Theory on SmackDown, considering he's been drafted, and as the United States Champion, I could see him, issuing some open challenge on SmackDown. I'm just going to say this now, I would love for it to be against Edge, considering, I've mentioned this before, I think Edge is a good opponent for him. I'd also love to see Bobby Lashley come out, considering, he's on SmackDown. Again, I don't know where Bronson Reed ended up. I'll have to look into that later. But again, these are all questions that I'm asking myself, and questions I think everyone should be asking themselves in terms of what's next for the United States title, what's next for the SmackDown Women's title, what's next for the Undisputed titles and the Tag Team titles, now that this draft is underway and it's been happening. Because all of these things and all of these questions are things that need to be answered and things that need to be looked at and determined. And so I'm really, really curious and really, really intrigued by what we might see tonight, considering that I think the draft is coming to a close if it's not already over. And so it's all stuff we have to kind of look at and be like, okay, this is eye-opening, what's next, Because there is a lot of things that I think WWE has planned, especially on SmackDown, considering every draft made for SmackDown speaks volumes to me in some way. And so I really see that as something to watch out for tonight in Friday Night Smackdown, is like, what are these drafts going to be leading up to? But, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. And again, if you wanted me to talk about Rampage or any other wrestling topic, NWA, MLW, whatever, feel free to comment that down below, and I'll do my absolute best. But, again, that's going to conclude tonight's episode. So, as always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.